The summer offensive of Russian occupation forces in Ukraine has failed. Most of Moscow's goals, which were set for the period from April to August 2025, have not been realized. This opinion was expressed by BILD military observer Julian Repke. It is noted that the occupiers tried to capture Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region, despite the fact that in August they managed to break into the city. 3 weeks later, all Russian units were destroyed or captured. In the northern direction, Vladimir Putin's plans to create a security belt in the Chernihiv, Sumy and Kharkiv regions also failed. Less than 70 kilometers of territory along the border ended up under Russia's control. In the south, in the Kherson and Zaporizhia regions, the front remained stable, and the Kremlin was forced to essentially abandon its plans for an offensive, the statement said. At the same time, Ukraine has stepped up drone attacks on oil refineries in Russia. The strikes are carried out at a distance of up to 1,200 kilometers deep into the territory of the aggressor country. Experts say that since the beginning of 2025, Ukraine has been able to disable 17% of the capacity of Russian oil refineries. This has caused prices to rise and fuel shortages within Russia. It is noted that during the summer period, the Russian occupation forces captured about 0.3% of the territory of Ukraine. We are talking about 1,800 square kilometers. Meanwhile, President Vladimir Zelenski said that he is ready to discuss a ceasefire, but not capitulation as the Kremlin demands. First of all, the organization of the Ukrainian army brings order to the ranks. Among the Russians, on the contrary, a certain fatigue is observed. However, in winter, when the ground freezes and the leaves fall from the trees, which reduces protection against drones, the Russians may try to go on the offensive again. Military expert Gustav Gressel emphasized in a commentary to BILD. Recall, Russian occupiers are trying to enter the territory of the Dnipropetrovsk region. As the spokesman of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Andrei Kovalev, reported, there are battles on the border of the Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk regions. He added that enemy sabotage and reconnaissance groups were trying to penetrate into the territory of Dnipropetrovsk region. At the same time, Kovalev emphasized that reports about the capture of the settlements of Zaporizhia and Novogeorgievka do not correspond to reality. Russian Z-patriot and war supporter Maxim Kalashnikov made an unexpected confession. He compared today's Russia to the Third Reich in its final years. According to him, Ukraine's strikes on oil refineries and pipelines, as well as the upcoming use of new missiles, could accelerate the fall of Putin's regime. Ukraine and the US have found a new way to force Russia to peace on their terms, intensifying the economic crisis. Kiev has begun strikes on fuel and energy complex facilities, and soon powerful Flamingo cruise missiles will fly to their targets, along with drones. The worried Z-patriot said. He stressed that the situation is reminiscent of the spring of 1944, when Allied aircraft methodically destroyed German fuel factories. According to the publicist, Russia is facing the same challenges, a growing economic crisis and the inability of the authorities to give an adequate response to attacks on critical infrastructure. Kalashnikov paid special attention to the reaction of the Russian leadership. I would like to be wrong, but I see clear signs of a moral and volitional breakdown in the highest establishment of the Russian Federation. The first warning bell was the lack of an adequate response after the web attack. Then there was no reaction to the paralysis of air transport and hacker attacks on the rear. And now the enemy has moved on to strikes at the fuel and energy complex of the Russian Federation. In response, there is some kind of stupor and feverish hopes for negotiations with Trump, he said. Kalashnikov compared the current situation in the Kremlin to the late USSR. According to him, the reaction of Putin and his entourage is reminiscent of the actions of Mikhail Gorbachev in 1986, when the Soviet economy was rapidly collapsing and the leadership was relying only on the hope of reaching an agreement with the United States. In fact, the Z-Patriot strongly hints at the collapse of the Putin regime as well as the entire Russian Federation. Earlier, Z-blogger explained why Putin will have to close down the SVO very soon. Kalashnikov recalled that at the beginning of 2025, the Russian budget deficit was planned at 1.2 trillion rubles. In the spring, the Ministry of Finance increased this figure to 3.7 trillion. And by the end of 7 months, the figure had already reached 4.9 trillion. By the end of the year, apparently, the minus will exceed 6 trillion rubles. But the problem is not limited to the main budget. According to Kalashnikov, a huge hole has also formed in the social fund, which includes the pension system and the social insurance fund. The shortfall there is approaching 7 trillion rubles. Taxes on salaries cover only about 60% of expenses, and the rest has to be patched up from the state treasury. Thus, the burden on finances is only growing. Now the warring country has a gigantic hole in its treasury. If it is not closed, the economy will collapse and lead to political collapse. Then we ourselves will have to ask for peace, he said. The Flight Radar website recorded the arrival of a Russian Tu-214SR aircraft in Israel. According to the published data, the aircraft with registration number RA64516, which is part of a special Russian air squadron, landed at Ben Gurion International Airport located near Tel Aviv. The Tu-214SR is a strategic aircraft that serves as a command, communications and reconnaissance post. Such aircraft are used by the Russian leadership to provide government flights and special missions. At the moment, there is no information about who exactly was on board, the purpose of the visit, and whether the arrival is connected with the current developments in the region. The context of the visit is reinforced by the worsening situation in the Middle East. On August the 20th, the Jerusalem Post, citing Israel Defense Forces General Efi Defrin, reported that IDF units had begun an offensive on Gaza, occupying the outskirts of the city. The very next day, August the 21st, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that the military operation against the Palestinian enclave should end as soon as the Israel Defense Forces establishes full control over the territory of the sector. Israel's Channel 13 reported that a number of Russian diplomats and their family members have already left the country. This fact is of particular importance in light of recent developments in the region, especially the escalating Israeli-Iranian conflict. According to observers, such a step by Moscow indicates that the possibility of a new Israeli-Iranian war in the region is growing. An additional noteworthy point is that such information and analysis are circulated primarily through Telegram channels affiliated with the IRGC. Thus, Russia has begun to safely evacuate its diplomatic mission, which could be a warning that the situation in the region is about to change dramatically.